what I was saying was affordable housing is a heavy lift. It's, and that's why the homeless are in the streets and the elderly can't stay in their own homes. And people are caught in institutional, too large, not well-managed property. They don't have community. And and it's because the system is set up, it's controlled by finance, insurance, and real estate, fire. They control policy, the money, who gets it, and how much profit there is there. And it's just, you know, how do you go against the biggest masters of the universe? You know, you use their tools to disassemble their house. And that's what we're doing with the co-op. It's like learning how finance works, getting yourself in order, figuring out the best way of negotiating a loan that the most people can afford, and eliminating, I mean, giving them control with training for property management so they can build community. And what's needed right now is, well, artists have always wanted space, big space with lots of windows, ventilation, elevators, etc. There's a whole population of uncounted people with disabilities who either live with their parents or live in an institutional setting, and they seem to not have any other possibilities. And 1 in 4 Americans live with disabilities. And so there's a huge underserved population. The other thing we're looking at is flexible space so that it can kind of be customized to your need, whether it's families, work, or, you know, disability. We're looking at intergenerational community because women live longer than men and they prefer to live in a community than not. They don't want to be isolated. And so there's a lot of people who need space where they can work at home. And so there's a lot of design issues with all of these populations that we're saying you bring the end users in and define what they need. It's a multi-family serving building that's affordable and controlled by the community, and they can build it to suit their needs. So we're constructing something that the fire industry doesn't really want or engage in.
Can you say what fire is again? I don't think Natalie heard that.
Okay, it's finance, insurance, and real estate. And they are responsible for redlining all over the world. So they've just constructed a market that suits their needs and nobody else's. You can't do it without them, but you can certainly, I mean, this is where we kind of change the rules of the game. And so it may be that what we have to do is go cultivate and educate partners to see our vision to create the product that we envision. And I think it's a great way for artists who have businesses to, you know, design a building that's suited to their needs, and that they're part of the retail commercial use of the building. And then they work with whatever else the community wants. If it's healthcare, if it's fast food restaurant, if it's gallery space that holds special events and loud music or not. Alpha can speak to that.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
So how is a way to have, and you're cultivating the language and the communities and relationship to start communicating those things. Can you touch
Yep.
upon, can you touch a little bit upon what is the non-threatening entrance level to start talking to city officials that don't immediately put them in trouble, or the mindset that they'll be in trouble with all of the people who are in real estate who are funding their campaigns and things like that?
Right. So one of the ways is to talk about holistic community development. So you're not only talking about, developing affordable housing, but you're talking about serving families, and building community where folks have some control over their business and jobs. So it has everything to do with economic development. And so development of housing, planning, economic development see these as goals, but they don't really know how to do it. In Chicago, the models that they kind of embraced was CHA, Chicago Housing Authority, and putting a library on the first floor. And so you got rental housing, and you've got a library, and in theory that's great, and there's really nothing wrong with it, but it doesn't, it's kind of more ghetto thinking.
Ghetto thinking? What do you mean?
Well, let's create a big building with as many units as possible and make it affordable and move all our CHA family in there.
Is that what they're doing
Yeah.
on State Street?
I don't know what are they doing?
There is the Chicago, what is it? The library over on State Street used to be like the Chicago Bee. And when they went in and renovated it, along with money for all the new mixed-use affordable housing that came in after they demolished and tore down the State Street projects over there. And so they started building up, and then they made sure that on that development corridor on State Street that they had a new library, and that library really services people that are right there in the neighborhood, which were the CHA housing.
I don't see libraries and CHA residents as being a bad investment.
Because libraries are serving as workforce development. Libraries are servicing
Absolutely.
as other means. They're just not like go to the library and you have research, you have books, but they have all these other things that are there for people that come.
Yeah, and it's the one thing that seniors want is access to medical information, doctors, how do I get RTA, how do I get things? And I know in senior housing, they have computer labs, but they're overbooked and everybody's waiting in line and there's not enough, computers to go around for everybody. So yeah, it's much needed. But I think what I'm talking about is non-institutional living, where folks have more opportunity to know and support each other. Cooperative housing is a good example of that, where you have, because the way it's structured, the management responsibility of the property, everybody gets to weigh in on the decisions. It's a small business itself. If you volunteer for committees within co-ops, you get to learn a lot about communications, marketing, there's all kinds of job skills that happen within this community management business that then they can apply to their own career development. And just because you're talking to your neighbors all the time about shared interests and your common ownership, there's the people stick around longer, much longer, because their housing is kind of taken care of at a reasonable level where they're paying less than 30% of their income. They can pay attention to their kids, to their job, to everything else that they kind of need in their life. And so it's a much more stable way to build community that CHA housing doesn't. I mean, there's room in the world for CHA housing. I just, when they do low income housing or moderate income housing, and then the regulations that go along with it, and the fact that you have to produce all your bank statements and how you earn a living every year to qualify for that lease, I find that disturbing.
Why?
You and everybody here at the Bronzeville Artist Loft,
I was
we
just
get
gonna say,
really, we would get pissed off every time they call us, and especially this last go around when we've already submitted all that stuff for our leases, and then because the building is in, I guess, in a state where someone else is buying it, then everyone here had to reproduce bank statements and all this stuff. Everyone was at arms about it and calling in like it's such a violation, or it's just, of our privacy. Why do you want our bank statements? And when we already are approved 6 months ago, for our lease, it hasn't even expired.
Did you all have to do that every year?
Every year.
Mm-hmm.
And see, I would call that extractive investment. I mean, the city had this property that was decrepit and it needed a lot of money to reactivate it. So they're kind of like, they pledged their money to reactivate it. The folks who won the RFP, I was one of them, or my organization was, managed this reinvestment and the construction and everything else. And Lee Reed and I were supposed to do the property management, and the bigger owner, the guy who owned a greater percentage of the project, took that away from us and handed it over to Safe Haven, Safe Harbor. I was interested in artists and the conversation and incubators and business and how the building, but I was pulled out of that role, and the property management is only interested in collecting the rents. And the guy who gives the financial reports on the building is a contractor, a construction company, who didn't have any buy-in in the community or the management of the building. And he kind of took that money and invested it in his company and his other projects. And so that didn't help the artists in the building whatsoever. It's kind of like they use the artists to say, this is a great project. It's new, it's different, it's unique. It's built on the resources and the cultural history of the community. And then they take that money and run away. And that doesn't help. What I'm talking about is that building itself is a small business that all the renters invest in. And if they don't have control over that, It's kind of somebody else does and is managing the property for their own purpose, which is probably their retirement. They're taking the money out of it. So when you talk about, you know, a small bill and 17 units and 3 or 4 retail spaces is considered a small building. You know, it ranges in development costs of 3.5 to 12 million dollars. But the folks who pay the monthly expenses should have a share of ownership, investment, and control over how that small business interfaces with the larger community. And so if somebody else is pulling money out of it, it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So
Now,
that's why, Lisa, when you talked about what's a good way to present this, is that it's a holistic approach to community development. You invest in the people. You invest in their education, their financial training, how they make decisions, how they manage a business together. You know, the beauty of the project is that if there's a structure there for folks to have input, they don't stay forever. You know, they get jobs, they leave, but there's always somebody to kind of fill those and get educated and be a part of that financial gain that resonates with the community. You want people to spend money in the community. They want to earn it in the community, spend it in the community, and kind of keep it. There's a group that does
Circular.
Well, circular investment or circular economies is one way of talking about it. There's also a group that's global that does local, what are they called?
Participatory budgeting, those people.
Yeah, local trade.
Yeah.
So they're kind of like about Main Street and reinvesting in your community and buying local. And so there's lots of examples if you look around to see what's going on in Los Angeles or Southern California. There's a new artist housing project that I'm going to go visit in February that's in Vista, California, that's developed by an affordable housing developer that mostly does senior housing. And they did it in partnership with a guy who manages property. And they're kind of run of the mill, you know, they're kind of ordinary senior housing property management. But why they chose, I'm very curious about why they chose to develop artist housing. And it's a building that's comparable to Brownsville Artist Lofts, and it has 2,500 square feet of retail on the first floor. And it's meant to be intergenerational, and it's rental property. But
Can you
they
give me the
know-
name of it so I can look it up, Laura, while we're talking?
I
'Cause
know, I was trying to look it up. with
I already
I'll
looked
put
up
it-
the circular economy. I was gonna pull that up too, like.
I know.
wait.
No, this is
Yeah,
so
we
great.
worked with a professor at IIT Graduate School who teaches in sustainability and circular economy. She's also on the board of the Co-op Ed Center here in Chicago, Weslyn Ashton. And her students worked with us to kind of brainstorm on some things. This was what, 2 years ago, Laura, was it?
Yeah, 2 years ago.
It's called, because I was trying to go there when I was in California, Liza. I couldn't get the people to call me back. So Laura, I would start now trying to get in touch with them.
Right.
Here's the circular
Do you want
economy.
me to try? You could do FaceTime.
Sure. Yeah, should I put it in the chat?
Yeah.
Here's the one you were talking about.
That's not far.
for the circular economy. This is what came up for me. Is this the people, what you're talking about?
No,
Not
no,
that one?
no.
Okay.
Put, let me see if I can pull something up for you that will get it more accurate. And I'll put it in the chat.
And
Okay.
what's the name of the Vista, or are you looking that up?
I'm writing it in the chat.
You
It's
found it,
Passcode
Laura?
Artist Village in Vista.
Yeah, it's in Vista. That was part of why I was taking the train, Liza. I was gonna stop at Oceanside, I think it was, Paseo, yeah, and go there. It's a beautiful looking building.
Yeah, but when you look back on who developed it and who's managing it, they don't have a whole lot of information. It's open for rentals now. But even the property manager who's doing it, doesn't have it listing on their new properties. But I like the way it looks.
Yeah, it looks nice.
It has lots of terraces, and the other thing that we're kind of big on is the physical design of the space, so that I don't like all those little balconies hanging off of buildings with a barbecue and a
I
chair.
can't wait to see this space. Where is it? I'm gonna look it up. Where is it?
Vista,
Cal-
California.
Okay.
So we purposely design the buildings to encourage communication between neighbors on a regular basis. So what we don't like is long, dark hallways. And we like to build community space that's shared.
Hmm. That's what drove me crazy about being at the switching station artist lofts over in East Garfield, is those long corridors from the elevator to get to, they're long. It's like you're hauling stuff, and no freight elevators really, as visual artists, live to haul those kinds of things. It just was unmanageable. I'm not finding.
No, that's it.
It's,
Here it is. I see it. Cool.
So somebody came up with yeah. So 60 apartments, 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. So it's a preference for artists, veterans, and local residents.
You said you don't like the balconies?
I don't. I like shared community space. So the balconies kind of give you outdoor space, but if you've got, it's kind of like our courtyard building is protected, safe space. We all have a sense of the weather. It's a co-housing design feature where you have shared space, but you also cross paths and you see neighbors on a regular basis. It encourages communication.
Do you know, can you say a little more about the developers or the people who got involved, what you know about? Do you know if they already have another building planned? Is that
Oh, you
who-
mean the developers of this particular project?
Mhm. Is that who you would contact to go see this space?
I would. And it's just my opinion of how they fund these projects. I don't see any artist community being attached to this, or any artists doing outreach in Vista, or it may exist and it's not something they put on their website. So that's why I'd want to talk to them. The experience that I've had with developers includes the Community Builders, which is a national organization that does affordable housing. And it's a tough group to, they were perfectly willing to hire me to do outreach and marketing with their project, tenant selection and the like, but the property management, which is in-house, doesn't know or appreciate artists very much. And frankly, I think they use the excuse of artist housing to make it affordable and attractive for the first 15 years. It's adjacent to Hyde Park. And I really think their
It's
intention.
in North Washington Park.
Right.
But then you said it was kind of like more of an experiment for them because this is the first kind of housing that they did for artists using that tax increment money.
Right. But what I'm suspicious of is that low and moderate income housing has restrictions for 15 years. And after that, it becomes market rate and the whole artist thing goes away. So
Same thing here.
yeah. Yeah. And, you know, Art Space is the national developer. It's done housing projects in 20, 30, 40 communities across the country. They use tax credits and they own all of the properties. So they own the switching station and they put a local realtor, property manager in charge of the building collecting the rents, who is not very sympathetic to the artist community that lives and works in that building. And so I don't know what happens to their projects after 15 years. You know, the artist should be able to buy it, but is that feasible, reasonable, or even possible? There's a group that does art space development in Toronto that's called Artscape. And they don't do well, it's in Canada. So they don't do tax credit financing. And the artists, they do the property management, and the artists and arts organizations that occupy all of their spaces are all part of the management, the property management. So they get kind of that cohesive circular economy. You know, all those arts organizations aren't just tenants and renters, they're investors in the project.
This right here is a switching station.
You know, the Big Beef, Pullman is listed as one of their projects, and it's work, live space. And the artists aren't allowed to run workshops in their space because it's zoned residential. The financing is for residential low-income property management.
Here's
So
Coleman.
yeah, so the restrictions in the property kind of go against what artists want and need. I mean, they can, once nobody's looking, they could probably run workshops there.
I thought that they got a neighborhood arts grant to, in their community space there, to turn around and fund artists to do programming out of their
Right.
community space, like a re-granting thing. They got what, that
Right.
$50.
So they're limited to doing stuff in the community space. Yes, they did make some of the space commercial.
Mhm. Let me
They
play
just
what they,
can't.
the little thing they got here. Can you hear that, guys?
Barely.
I had been in previous
There you go.
circumstances where I could hear arguments above me, people
It's really low.
above me.
Just a
and I
minute.
just remember feeling a sense of just calamity in my mind. I just want peace.
I was in a house working out of a basement, and so I was looking for somewhere to go. I was looking for a studio.
I actually was sick for a while. I had cancer, and so I took like 4 years off. And so I'm just kind
I'm
of
gonna have
getting
to
back
start
into
the video
it,
over.
getting back into trying to exhibit and getting the body work.
Is that they move into some because they and that's they begin to so the mission of art space is really to serve artists in neighborhoods, which makes it really viable and really respect what they give to them. Because something for the neighborhood is just totally.
I'm gonna go back, stop this video. Let's keep talking.
Natalie, did you have any questions?
I was just listening to the thread of conversations happening, and I have to say I'm very intrigued over here.
That was good, Laura.
It's real juicy.
I know, some good stuff.
So Liza, there was a group in San Francisco that was working with a developer reactivating shopping malls, kind of big box stores. But that was probably 6 or 8 years ago. So I would have to, when I Google art space reactivates shopping mall, I get but I haven't found the one in San Francisco. So an arts directed non-for-profit was working as a partner with this developer to do some real specific kind of problem solving development in big box stores that were, this was well before COVID. So they just needed something besides shopping as a economic driver. But I haven't heard from this group in a really long time. And so right now everybody's into workforce development and microchip production and engineering and robots, but there's a group in Jackson, Mississippi that I've referred to in case studies that took an old mall and turned it into health and community cultural center. And so the whole thing is that the health isn't a hospital-like clinic, but it's a one-stop. You can go and find resources, social service, etc. But the community arts is a very active place kind of in the main street of this. So what's nice is they're telling stories about, from an artist's perspective, that's changing all the time, which, makes the whole community feel, it inspires pride and knowledge about the cultural history, and it's engaging. It's always changing. There's not one group that's responsible for it's coming out of the community in many organizations. And Jackson is a small town. I don't know how big it is.
I love what you
Yeah.
just said.
Yeah,
It's-
Jackson is a small town. Jackson, Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I have a friend who's part of the whole cooperation Jackson that's going on down there.
Yeah. Co-ops are big in Jackson, and it's kind of,
She's from here. She came from here.
huh.
Are co-ops ever conflated with communism or socialism, or how is it, or is that acceptable to party identification?
People think about co-ops and they kind of make the equivalent with communes. It's hippie and free love and everybody's, and so that's not true. Cooperatives exist as credit unions. They serve banking in communities that had no banks. They serve farmers and agriculture, both as a way to get supplies at a reduced rate, but then they also have a larger share of the market. So the co-ops have helped farmers distribute their goods. They're not left on their own. Co-ops are electric utilities. So in the Appalachian Mountains, etc., when so many people still didn't have electricity in the Depression, co-ops were established, and it was effective in wiring a huge rural community when commercial utilities wouldn't go in there because it costs too much. So co-ops are oftentimes a business solution to a problem.
So in many ways, I mean, I think much of the identity around politics, if it was more about economics, there'd be, of course, much more collaboration. So this is an area where it can be seen as bipartisan and can enrich the community and really move everything in a proper direction. It's not, it hasn't been targeted as such, as
Right.
a woke or democratic thing in order to have an immediate a Pavlovian repulsion. So this is a good thing. This is good to know. Another question. When looking for developers who might, I think I've asked this before actually, but when looking locally for developers who might be potential collaborators, what is the process of identifying and looking for this? What is the where do you begin to go to even find potentially collaborative partners in the real estate industry from top to bottom, but looking for even inspectors or anything that might be supportive of, doing things differently? How do you not scare them off, and how do you identify the ones that are going to appreciate what you're trying to do?
That's a really good question. And when we started doing this project, we got together our artists and said, we need affordable housing. We need to buy it. What can we afford? And so we were looking at the whole industry as consumers, and it's kind of like, who's driving the costs of this up that we can get rid of to make it affordable? So, it's like, how do you approach a market and get rid of the middlemen that add costs that doesn't improve the product? And so we had a clear idea of our mission. We did market research, and so we had enough artists on board. We also knew that they had a rich history of paying rent over a long period of time. So where they don't really qualify for mortgage loans, they have good, reliable rent history. So that's something that kind of made them a valuable commodity to us. So we went out to Habitat for Humanity and other affordable housing developers, community development organizations in Chicago. And this was 30 years ago. And so they were so busy using tax credits and fighting for every scrap of housing that was available to do their projects. So they really didn't have the bandwidth to invest in new ideas. They were defending the interests of their poor and low moderate income communities, and they were aggressively going after that. So somebody like the community builders, or this group in Vista, there's some groups in California that like intergenerational housing. There's money available for senior housing, but California is interesting and progressive in the sense that not everybody who goes into senior housing is ready for the nursing home. They want some added amenities that makes their life more interesting. So you also have the SAG, the artist guilds. You've got folks with money who, could put money into one of the values of living in intergenerational housing is you may be a senior and like kids and teenagers and everybody else who kind of comes with that in your community, rather than being 55 and older. So there may be, I really think there was a group that did theater projects for seniors, and they got involved in doing housing projects because this was a natural way for them to keep doing theater programs with seniors. And they had seniors and kids and seniors and so they had seniors involved in all kinds of programs. So they kind of had access to this community that wanted to be very active. And so I think they went after the Screen Actors Guild or other unions and put together a proposal with senior housing funding in order to create these communities. So the advantage is that when you think about this new, they don't develop these communities to be segregated and gated from the community. There's outreach. So to have a Montessori school with grandparents is kind of ideas that they embrace. And so I can kind of come up with a list of examples of that in California. It's kind of, there's real projects there where nobody's really thinking about it in Illinois.
I'm looking up Habitat for Humanity. How is getting involved in that organization a good way to, first of all, it's a productive way to use your time is to volunteer, but is that a good way to meet people possibly?
Yeah, yes. And it's
Like-minded individuals.
well, if they're open to new ideas, the woman, one of the ways that we couldn't find a full-fledged developer to work with us, but we found a financial consultant who put loan packages together for non-for-profits. So she knew everybody on the funding side, and she knew all the folks on the users side, the non-for-profit side. And she was a volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. And so I was invited to a think tank. They wanted to expand their model and think about new ways of engaging the community. And so it was interesting to see how they thought and what worked and what they were open to. And so that was an interesting collaboration. I haven't been back to Habitat for Humanity, but looking around for independent financial consultants who work in that arena. I met ours at a co-housing conference that University of Illinois sponsored. And so that was a 10-year relationship. It was much like Alpha's relationship with, is it Lynn Lowry? The woman in real estate who's a broker.
Lauren
Lowry, right. And so she, she's independent, but in talking to her right away, you find out that there's shared values. So that's where you kind of get around and find folks who either understand non-for-profits or the needs of the community, or knows and understands financing and is a person who kind of translates it for the benefit of the community.
Well, speaking of translation, I may have already asked this a little bit, but with the developers specifically, like when you start making yourself known within the community and what you're looking for, and you're in a situation where there are possible, interested parties in the room overhearing what's happening or taking a look at, how do you keep the hairs from standing up on the back of their necks and not alert them to what your genuine plans are? Is there language to avoid? Is there language to allay fears that you might be interested in some of the buildings or some of the funding or some of the, I think it's the whole mindset that they're worried that will transition, right? So they have to stop certain projects from even occurring because then other people want to do more projects like them. So anything you can say on your thoughts on how to not create enemies quickly in a community so you could get further down the process. Anything you can share on that, any thoughts like that? And I don't know if you want that recorded or not.
Oh, no, that's a really important thing to think about. And when we were an arts organization that had regular gallery exhibit projects, et cetera, we were open to the public year round. We had, we invited the local elected officials, aldermen and some of the board members of the Affordable
Mhm.
Housing Development Group. We invited him to come in on a panel and talk about gentrification. And so this was very fruitful because their assumption was artists were white. They were the vanguard of the real estate community. They moved in, changed the perception of the community, attracted all of this investment, which chased poor people out. And so we needed to demonstrate to them that we weren't the enemy. We were low and moderate income families. We were Latino and Black, and as well as white. And we were passionate about what we were doing, and we wanted to protect the culture, the existing culture of the community. And so inviting them in with an audience of artists that reflected the interests of the community convinced them that we were good partners. And so from then on, it's like when they were running for re-election, they'd plug into what we were doing because they would have an audience, and they could see that the audience wasn't just artists, but came from the community. And so that built our kind of alliance and our reputation, and build trust. So, you know, aldermen like you to come and genuflect at their knee and embrace their projects, but like getting them out to see the value of arts in the community that was a little tougher, but once we got them there, it was valuable. Kind of got them out of their, you know, their
Yeah.
bar room discussions with real estate developers. Write me a check. So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I noticed, you know, any mention of anything that's even remotely supportive of, you know, just because you care about the community is not acceptable conversation. You know, I remember when I was asked several times what motivated me or why I was in this, if it wasn't where the money is and how I could describe how I was extracting the money, there was no interest in, and almost shock and almost dismiss, like you're dismissed, you're not a serious person, you know. And so I thought that was kind of fascinating in those circles early on, my early memory of like when we were starting this project and what we were thinking about doing, and what our motivations were and things like that. But I also noticed that if you kept quiet and you didn't discuss those things and you left it sort of, you were non-threatening, and therefore you were allowed in the room and you were given opportunity because you were non-threatening in other respects as well. And this is just
I think
storefront programming. This is not in the serious nature of developing property. Sorry, Kiela.
No, you're fine. My cat, I think my cat found a mouse. I might have to run away for a minute.
Uh-oh.
I heard something running, then I saw the cat jump from the ceiling. I'm like, oh my God, they're coming in through my ceiling. I was just gonna say, I think there's a space where when we worry too much about that, we can't stand in, or it's more difficult to stand in these places where we confront people. You know, I mean, some of that I think sometimes is a necessary component, and you're not always seen as like the best person people want to collaborate with. But the reality is, to a certain degree, I don't know how it is in California. I know here we have the, like Laura said, kiss the alderman ring bullshit. And that's not the case everywhere. However, some things, like the example that everyone's holding up right now in Chicago called PICO, the Pilsen Housing Cooperative, they don't need the aldermen because they have a process that circumvents all of that bullshit. So I think, you know, in my mind, that's only a factor to a degree, depending on how much you need from the city.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to put in context, what I was referencing though is I'm literally was out there begging for $60,000 a month property for free. You know, I'm out there asking for them to give us space to do what we want to do in it. And so the framing was, well, how does this benefit you? How does this support you? And the erasure of how it supported the community and all those things. I mean, we were told to not even bring up art at all, or artists, or how it supports artists in any way in the beginning when we were talking to the property owners and asking them for space and things like that. You know, so I was seeing, you know, it was a different mindset than this. And they were looking at it as like, oh, well, you'll gentrify. And at the time we were thinking, oh, we're revitalizing, we're getting a piece of the pie for artists. And that was the naivety of the time. This is a long time ago, but it was interesting.
One of the things that you could, you know, we're still up against, you know, the what benefit do artists play in the community? Well, they impact education, they impact, you know, community culture, history, you know, all the different ways they engage, you know, a board of directors that comes from the community that, you know, so that's social engagement. People who are engaged in the arts vote. If they don't want more voters, they're not going to embrace the arts. But it's one of the things that, so we're constantly in that kind of defensive mode because artists are kind of warm and fuzzy and everybody likes them and everybody's got one in their family, but they're not the leading edge of community development or whatever. In Chicago, there's a lot of quality of life plans that are put together in the community that takes years of focus groups and discussions. What do you want to have happen? And arts permeates everything: job, workforce, education, housing, business development, etc. But it's not you know, artists and arts organizations aren't sitting at the table kind of, it's kind of a warm and fuzzy that permeates everything, but it's not, it doesn't have a dedicated voice at the table. And so that argument about artists and arts programs and arts activities are good for the community, it might be worthwhile. That's something that everybody can agree with if you point out the data. And so it may be that it's a one sheet kind of profile. It doesn't talk about needing the space for free, but it talks about the value of artists and community. If you want to change the community, you know, here's what artists can do. And you pull together all the data that, and that gives you kind of, it plants the seed. The property owners and real estate are all talking about return on investment. And so the social aspects of it never factor into their business plan. They have to, because the city says, how is this good for the community? But really their standards of measurement all have to do with their pocketbook, return on investment, and how much profits at the end of the day. So they're not factoring social capital at all. And that's the language that we have to kind of treat folks. We have to educate them about that.
I had to educate my physical therapist to not trivialize my profession. When I went there, because I have a strained rotor cuff and my dominant arm when I paint and I'm doing murals and stuff like that. And he told me, well, you know, you're going to probably have to quit your hobby. And I said, do not trivialize my
Right.
career. And you have to call them on it. If you don't call them on it, they'll continue to. He didn't
Mhm.
even think he did anything wrong. He didn't see art as a profession in his head and in his mind. He saw it as, you know, your hobby. And so the second time I went in, it was now the respect, because I had to demand the respect, because I didn't even hesitate to tell him to not trivialize my career by telling me it's a hobby. It's not an
Yeah.
option for me to stop being an artist and stop painting. I mean, help fix the strain, give me my physical therapy so
Right.
I can get back to doing business as an artist. And I did introduce myself as a consultant, yes, but that strain, you know what I mean? It's just that
Mhm.
that this whole stereotype on what artists are, and I did put into the chat how much we are in the creative economy, and they don't even see going to the movie theater and creating a movie and how that contributes to, you know, jobs.
Mhm.
They don't even see how opening a gallery and running a gallery creates jobs, you know, in community, you know what I mean? So I always go back to that whole thing about whitewashing the community with these developments, because again, after 15 years, the switching station is already just a regular place where the management company doesn't even screen for artists. They just put people in there, and it's not being really run as an artist collective at all anymore over there. But I'm going like, for a lot of these spaces, it's the same, you know, it's just that attitude about, you know, what art is. And if you don't call them on it, you know, and continue to call them on it, then they'll continue to disrespect what we do. And I demanded that respect just the other day with saying, do not trivialize
Yeah.
what I
Right.
do, you know, for my profession.
Right.
Fix it.
It was an architect I was testifying to city council about laws that were building regulations that were in place that were counterproductive to artists. And an architect who wrote the new policy for the Department of Planning, you know, said out loud in a group of 200 people, everybody loves artists, they're warm and fuzzy, but we don't change the laws to suit them. And it's kind of like, wait a second. You know, it was like the woman who was the commissioner of housing. Her attitude was, artists choose to be poor on purpose, and we're going to build housing for homeless. And it was like, you know, it's just that attitude that, so you study, you get an art degree, and somewhere along the line, you grow up and get a real job, is kind of the prevailing attitude, rather than talking about it's this whole underlying creative economy that we're like, I don't know, we're like moss that creates new earth on top of rocks or something like that. I don't know. We can talk about permaculture, or that we're perennials, or anything but celebrity. You know, I don't like that, you know, the only artists that get any attention are at the pinnacle of their career, but how many artists are underneath that and need, you know, they need an ecosystem of support. And we don't choose to be poor on purpose, but we're passionate about what we know and do.
So I'm going to share with you all. Have you heard about the party?
No,
No.
Okay. Here it is. The party. Last Wednesday, I went over to the Fortune House Art Center, which is right like next door to the Bronzeville Winery, Kiela, over here. And so when you're talking about artists having a say in public spaces, so they asked 3 different organizations to they've asked several people in the community to have a seat at the table because there's like $1 million coming into Bronzeville just to do sculpture work. So I'm going to go back to
This is city funded?
And they've had these different meetings, Inglewood, Austin, Auburn, Gresham, Bronzeville, you know, and to talk about how to prioritize, you know, the this
Can you
is
put,
over
you're
here.
gonna put that link in the,
Yeah,
party
I'm gonna
in the chat.
actually I'm gonna start this over. This is not where I want to be. Sorry about that, ladies.
I found that interesting. Did you see that piece right there where it said phase 3, and then in quotes, it said a seat at the table? You give people a seat at the table at phase 1.
yeah,
Right, but it's interesting how they left off. Excuse me, I have to go back because I was going faster than I'm over here on a multi-dimensional level of going too fast. Sorry about that. But I put this in here because I attended one that was over at the incubator with Bernard, you know,
41st.
space, and they had one out there on the patio where everybody met up. I'm going back to the link, sorry. And so, you know, they were leading the discussion. I didn't attend the one in Inglewood. I just attended the ones that were here in Bronzeville. And interesting enough, they're bringing in a consulting team to visit this conversation and do the planning for it. So here it is again. And this is led by the Department of Cultural Affairs, and it's done by Invest Southwest, of course, Borderless, and working with these 3 consulting teams: Inglewood Art Collective, the Floating Museum, and Creative Consulting. And so they're the ones that have been brought to the table to bring people together to kind of envision what's going to happen within this public art and what the public needs. They showed up at over here at the Fortune House. I went right back to where I didn't want to be. Sorry about that. I'm not on my A game today, ladies. But it's just interesting how the dynamics in the room and what happened when we were talking about this project, and because I'm going to always go to the table, and not always go to the table, but go to the table talking about what, let's see here. I don't know why it keeps coming back here. Go to the table and talk about the placemaking part of art in the community, and looking for how, instead of plopping the art down like the Department of Cultural Affairs does, and look at how they can maximize that funding to create more public art kind of opportunities, instead of just one project, and then funding one artist to come in after they go through the request for proposals, selection, and then here's the art, and there's no community dialogue about what that looks like. It was interesting enough that Patrick McCoy and Felicia Grant Preston were in this meeting, and they were looked on as the historians for Bronzeville because they have long-term investments here. They have housing here. They lived and worked here, cultivated the arts here. I came in 2014, right? So I'm in the middle ground. And then with Fortune House, it was a younger set of young adults that are like, 23 and under, where they use their space to, present the project. And Patrick took another look at the historical part of Bronzeville and looking at how this money could be done as murals along that, what is it that, I don't know if you heard about that new walking path that CTA is doing for that defunct rail line.
Right. Well,
yes.
I've been visualizing that since we bought our house in 2002. Yeah, because it goes
So-
kind of near the house my husband and I bought. And it
Right
got
there.
approved. It got money to advance.
So that's what I'm saying. If you got money, why are you trying to take the pot of $1 million from the public art that would come in for a new project? And why would you want to even suggest that it goes into a pot of money that CTA has, where that 1% or that percentage that goes into public art, there's already money. I'm going to a meeting on the 9th because I need to address that. I had to rethink that after the meeting. Like, why would you even say that? What we should be talking about when that is such, I feel like that's such an isolated area, and how many people in the community are going to walk that path once it's built. And the whole thing was to talk about how to recreate the wall of respect and how to recreate different opportunities for muralists to come in and create that walking path and have sculptures or whatever along that walking path to reinvest that money. The other part of the conversation was how they wanted to take, and this is still on artist housing, this is still on developing community, but they wanted to take the and circumvent that money on Cottage Grove, which is not part of the 47th and 43rd and King Drive, kind of like, that L shape or that U shape, which defines kind of like Bronzeville, those pathways, that connect with CDOT, but they wanted to change, to put it on Cottage Grove because of the housing that's coming in over there and the development, the business corridor that's happening over there. They wanted to take that money that could be distributed for public art and just look at Cottage Grove as a corridor, of development. And there's a lot of housing opportunities over there. And then there's a lot of like mixed use opportunities where there's the storefronts and then the housing above those. You're familiar with that development. That used to be Ida B. Wells, that all that housing was torn down. And so now they're coming.
That's the community builders. They did that development.
So anyway, we kind of like disagreed about, why are you pandering to the developers, with this taking the money that's for public art and this part of the legacy district, that we're in, and taking it and pandering to the developers to create public art along that corridor because of the development. And that question was asked, to the director of the public art program that was there. Nothing was talked about in terms of artist housing in that area because our focus was on, permanent art and public spaces and investing with the Southwest neighborhoods and asking us, what do you suggest? And so these were different conversations that were happening that night while we were all together for that last meeting of the three that they've had.
Well, let me tell you, most people who know of Bronzeville Artist Lofts, if it comes up in conversation, like in their mind, there's already artist housing. There's Bronzeville Artist Lofts. Like that is a model in so many people's minds as like, oh, well, that's already taken care of. They know nothing really about it, but in their mind, oh, that's not even like a need or a concern in that area, which is crazy, but
they don't even talk about the other Cornerstone project over there, which is artist housing.
Yeah, but it's still rent.
Apartments.
It's still, yeah, but it's the same model, right, Laura? I mean, it's not, it's a
still
subsidy
rental.
model of rental.
Right.
Yeah. That's going to be in the same boat as Bronzeville Artist Lofts in how many years? Not that long.
Well, here's the questions I was trying to share. I found, finally.
I put that link in the chat.
Did you put it in? Okay.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, it's always important to show up, to these meetings. It wasn't a virtual meeting, it was like in person, and having these conversations and always putting, like, here it is, they're putting this 5-year, plan together. And
they're terrible at marketing.
because people said, how many people really knew about this, right?
Mhm.
That was the question.
Not
And
enough,
if you're
never
not,
enough.
and if you're not on a mailing list for these to come in and talk about this, and have your input on it, then you just totally missed the boat. I mean, missed the boat on this. But
Yeah,
you
it
know.
blows my mind how horrible the city is at marketing their projects and programs.
So I was kind of more, of course, interested in the, what, like here at why articulate new and innovative uses of public space like streets, sidewalks, and plazas, because I'm more focused on the pedestrian experience. And I keep going back to that 2012 plan for Chicago, where, how they did put that big arts plan together in 2012. But I always take the and highlight, the pedestrian conversation, and about, as you're asking, you're bringing public art in, and you're asking artists to be a part of these conversations, and you're saying that these are legacy districts, and some of this, like the legacy project that's going to go in across the way from us, is affordable housing. Is it directed for artists? But you got an event space as part of your plan. You have, as part of that plan, they have where you can actually buy your condo, and live there. And then you got so many rentals that are there. It's kind of like a whole mixed use of stuff. But it's just, to me, going to be interesting in what's going to happen with these corridors in their next 5 years being here in this legacy district, and then what that looks like with the monies that they're getting for public art to come in, so we're not at the table sitting there trying to talk about it. It was interesting to me also that I know everyone, and not really in the Inglewood Arts Collective, but the Floating Museum, I know those consultants, Fahim, and then I also know Creative Consulting. But you just mentioned that we're not part of those conversations, but it's interesting in how the Department of Cultural Affairs is looking at these, these collectives as people that are trying to shape the conversations. Here we are here.
Well, I found it interesting. I was just looking at this timeline they had.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had like these, they call it phase 1, phase 2. Phase 1 meeting in oh God, I don't know where the timeline went, but a phase 1 meeting in one neighborhood. And then a phase 2 meeting, I believe Inglewood Arts Collective, but the phase 1 meeting said it was with stakeholders and community residents for light. They very specifically said light feedback. I'm like, what the hell is that? That means we want to pretend like we're listening, but we don't want a whole lot back from you.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such
Get
bullshit.
a Post-it note.
And they did have Post-it notes, as a matter of fact, I walked away with one of the maps, that they had. They don't even mention, what's already here. You said they reflect to the Bronzeville Artist Lofts. We're not even on this map. They talk.
No, I don't mean party. I'm just saying kind of in various conversations I have had with people over, they either don't know about Bronzeville Artist Lofts at all, or they do. And in their mind, that's like,
Done
that's
deal.
the arts.
Right.
That's it. Right. That's what we have that,
Yeah, but they're talking more over here on the Invest Southwest legacy project, and which is right across from us, interesting enough. And then they have a quotation, bubble on top of our building, but they just talk about the 6-story building with 12,000 square foot of commercial and 25 mixed income residential units that are coming down this way from that money. And then of course, they got CTA and other places, but not, where, it's just interesting if we don't follow the trend and the conversation we and then when is this buried, you know? So they're gonna go back now to the office and try to consolidate all of this conversation. They did a visual, you know, they had someone there recording the session so that they can say that that it was documented, you know, that these are the stakeholders that were in the, you know, community talking about, you know, what that looks like. And this is not only for the South, but also over in Garfield and Lawndale and in those areas. So
And what they've done so far was so phase 1 was Inglewood Arts Collective, phase 2 was Floating Museum. And probably just because of the level of awareness and just inclusiveness with our vision, the one thing that blows my mind, not only about the website, but just what they're doing, is there's no attention at all to creatives with disabilities in any of this that I can see. And even in the spaces they're meeting in, some of the photos I saw, it's like you meet in a vacant lot with dirt, and or at least those are photos I see of people and spaces. It's just, it's too uninformed to me, and it's too shortly planned. And I brought that up in terms of Invest Southwest development projects before, and someone's comment to me was, well, you know, the city gets this money and they have to have it spent by a certain time, and so their timeline is fast. That's one of the inherent issues too, is there's always these really fast timelines they've got to work on that don't allow for adequate and complete, I should say, engagement with the community. Not that they need to have years and years, but it's just so, it's like, look, we did this. We went and met with this group. Maybe they have 20, 30 people. That's really community engagement enough? You know, but they've got all this funding so they can move.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought I would share that with you, that I went over there to that meeting on, I think it was Monday night, no, last week. I went over there and was a part of that, you know, and you know, it was just interesting how like the historians in the room, they want to go back to the wall of respect, you know, and look at having a bigger conversation about public art and mural making, you know. When I go to this next meeting on the 9th, it's about, okay, you know, I'm going to research and find out that they already have a pot of money for that walk, you know, for that, you know, CTA, revamping it as a, you know, walking, you know, pathway to just let them know you can't basically double dip and take money from this source where we can spread that funding more instead of just one project, and how to look at it as placemaking. And so I sent them I sent the director the information from the California project that I'm helping to I'm a consultant and project managing on, and from one director to the other. So when she starts looking at, and you know, we start looking at that RFP and RFQ, you know, there's other ways and other things that can be presented where it's spread out more for other artists to be able like to do a sculpture and be part of, you know, the installation of other sculptures. Like we're doing 22 in Sacramento. Why are you not taking $1 million and doing 22 sculptures, you know, and that, and having artists, you know, place these. And then there's this announcement that came out where the city has 2,000 empty lots for sale. Right. And the Art and Public Places says the city doesn't own any of the lots, or public, you know, they don't own any lots that they can put public art on. So my question is, why not? Why are you not looking at the investment into some of the empty lots so that these can be placemaking opportunities or placing art?
I think they don't want the development work and component. They don't want the long-term maintenance, like, you know, their Pop Plazas initiative, right, where they funded, what was it, 10 or 20 of the first wave. There's supposed to be another iteration of it. And I think all of us should make sure we apply for it to address some of these vacant lots as well and develop them as permanent spaces for the community. But even in Together We Heal, for example, that was one of the questions. Like one of the things they wanted you to consider was activating city-owned lots. So like in our proposal, we put a couple of them in there, but it definitely wasn't about something. Well, they did have the option to do something that was more permanent. Ours didn't include that because we ideally want to develop that lot, into the housing. But I think I don't know. I think what Maurice Cox has done, that he brought from Detroit, his energy, he's created a lot of energy. He's created a lot of movement. He's created a lot of momentum. COVID gave a lot of money that has fueled a lot of this. But I think, I don't know, it feels like a bunch of take it and throw it and let it see where it sticks. Because it doesn't all integrate with these pillars they talk about directly, at least as far as I think. You got the We Will pillars, you got the what's it called? Racial and wealth equity department. So there's like all these different levels of this Invest Southwest initiative that I don't think are as integrated as they want us to think they are.
No,
Yeah.
I don't think so either. I think that they, like I said, they got the money, and someone else from QCDC, Rhonda, yeah, she was like, well, we don't know what's going to happen after the election, because right now we're in a political year.
Right.
And,
You mean,
you know what I mean?
for the alderman
Southwest,
or just
yeah.
and mayor too?
Mayor,
Mhm.
and this is an initiative of Lori Light. So if she doesn't win, are the new mayor going to come in and keep doing the Southwest, initiative? Was the question that was asked. We don't know, everybody's saying, here's all this money, and we want the arts to be a catalyst or a bandage, or this is where we fit in, and this is where the Department of Cultural Affairs says this is where we fit in, and here's the money to do that. But then they talked about like the corral fences that are up, and who got all that money for that initiative to put wooden corral fences. Have you all seen those in the community?
Wooden corral fences.
Those wooden fences.
Do you mean, you don't mean the people spot type things out in front of restaurants in the street where people can sit?
If you go down the street, you'll see those corral fences. They're like, the old corral around city lots.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess I haven't seen them considerably that it stands out in my mind.
Okay. Yeah. But there is a way, we're doing something constructive with our empty lot that is surrounded with the corral fence, because that's what we do. We program around that, you know what I mean? And pick up the trash. I don't pick up the trash. Well, sometimes I pick up the trash, but Andre's out there picking up the trash, and making sure that it's clean. But if you go down those lots, sometimes there's all kind of debris and trash thrown over there, and some of the rails are being broken, because sometimes it's these experiments that are dropped down in the community, are social experiments, I call them. And CDOT was in the room, and maybe some of the other developers that thought about putting those fences out there like that on city lots. It's like those are social experiments, as far as I'm concerned, to see what are they going to do. Who's going to take care of them? How does the community embrace them? Who is the caregiver or caretaker of that lot? Nobody was in the first place. Is that a way for litter abatement, to have these lots that are up there? And maybe this is not even a concrete, maybe it's an abstract conversation. I'm happy about it because I hadn't really planned on talking about it. But when we were sitting there and CDOT was in the room, I did mention that you guys are putting these social experiments together. You're saying that you have these, you have these focus groups that say this is what this corridor needs. And then when you put them out there, the community doesn't embrace them. They take the plants and throw them out in the street, or, use them as banisters to sit on, places of gathering, but inappropriately, you see plants or gardening as a threat to the normal way community is before it's gentrified, who knows? But I'm just saying, in a meeting, every chance I get, I say, do not bring social experiments into the community and expect for the community to embrace those or be the caregivers of those social experiments, because you didn't get the community's input. So you're going to bring public art sculptures into the community. You're going to have to make sure it's something that is, these are here where they're not temporary. They're things that are going to be in permanent, spaces as public art owned by the city. So make sure that when you're structuring how the community embraces them, that it's done correctly, or you're going to have just a mess out there, with no engagement at all.
Right. Right.
And then you all know about the individual artists grants, RFPs that are out there, the applications that are out there.
For that,
So
for that huge $6,000.
Yeah, all that money. So I was like, I had to ask the question last night because I was on the webinar, and I'm going like, well, what do you mean research? Because I'm thinking about pop-up research. I'm going like, what kind of project could, but podcasts, they'll cover podcast, and you have to have had at least 2 years in doing the podcast, so I was, rethinking how to propose that, as individual artists or collaborative doing it. Are you guys, anyone on the team applying individually for that $6,000?
Which you ain't gonna get. You're gonna get less.
Right, but they tell you to ask for what you want.
Right.
Yeah.
I am considering it. I'm not
Mhm.
sure. It's a lot for just the potential of $6,000. It's
A lot of work, right?
yeah, it
Yeah.
is. It is.
Yeah. And so even during this meeting, for me to I have to go back in after our meeting and go into iSupplier. Have any of you went through that with the city procurement?
We
Yes.
All
did,
those
yeah.
steps?
Yes.
In order for me to get my check, after this meeting, I'm gonna have to go back into iSupplier with the city to just put my name back in. It's gonna be another 2 hours of trying to go navigate that whole system and load up if I want to get my money from the neighborhood arts grant, where I have everything in under the Phantom Gallery. So I don't know, it's just, someone said, even with works for the city, it's such a nightmare, to get in and be a supplier with the city. And you think you got everything ready to go and your check is already getting there. And when we started this meeting, I was like, no problem, I'm on it. But it's a lot of work, to get back and reverse and go back in there. And, position yourself to receive your money that you've already jumped through. How many hoops?
Yeah,
I mean, so many hoops that I've jumped through just to get, to have this conversation. So annoying.
right.
And if you're talking about millions of dollars, and I'm only talking about less than $1,000, well, it's more than 1,000, less than 10,000. I'm going like, it's a lot of hoops to jump through, but then, money is money, I guess, for these projects.
Well, there's a saying, all money ain't good money. And you got to think about your time too, like how much you put into doing it and the potential of what can come from it for yourself personally and for the community, to decide, like, you can say no to stuff in lieu of saying yes to something that would take the same amount of time, but perhaps give you 5 times the amount of money.
Right. And I'm not even thinking about really applying for that. I just noticed I was on the webinar last night when they were presenting the first workshop for that funding, like that. So, and then again, if you have been funded for some of these other projects that we talked about that are multi-millions of dollars, and if you got $1, you're not able to apply for,
Or the
they
individual.
asked you, did you get any city funding from any of these other programs? If you have, of course, it's supposed to be a different project, but they're looking to spread the wealth, spread the money around even more. And interesting enough, this morning we had a conversation with the NEA, one research manager, and to go over the notes from an application that was submitted in September under research. And she gave some good pointers for the future to go back and kind of flush out these proposals. And, you know, and that's what I took my takeaway is how to shape the narrative and shape the conversation, and go back again, you know, and submit. But it was good exercise in let's call her up. Let's let her know that we're serious about the application, and let's hear the, you know, the feedback, you know. And so, you know, we got constructive feedback and nothing that tore down the organization, but you know, ways to reshape it and think about less is better when you're applying for this.
Any more elaboration?
No, because we
I-
only have
to-
3 minutes
to
under
what-
research. Basically what under artistic like merit, we really scored good scores, but the whole thing was to write it so that people understand what it is you're doing. And because Pop-Up Research Station has done so much, and we try to put everything in that narrative, that we need to pull back and then focus on telling the story, you know what I mean, about you know, about how we're going to glean, because we keep saying that we're going to glean information from artists, but we never state the argument of how we're doing that, you know, and then to package better, you know, in terms of what we submit, because everyone on the collaborative is an expert in their field, but the panel has to understand the project. And the same thing that they said last night for the individual artist project. The bottom line, we need to understand what it is you're doing, and then to really work on the executive summary of the proposal so that you have it in your mind of what you're working. So we all are kind of grant writers, but with this project, it's so, you know, as a think tank, you know, it brings a lot to the table. And so we got to sort that out. I think that's about it for today. I think it was a really good conversation, Laura. And
Oh, Natalie's gone? Oh, no, she's not.
Our brain is a little bit gone, but I'm here. That's from
so
5
your brain
a.m.
is gone up. Oh.
Less than almost there. It's not 1 o'clock on my clock, but I could play it a little early.
Yes.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
coming,
ladies.
everyone. Have a great conversation. Bye, Elsa. You can sign off quickly this time. Very exciting. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
And congratulations on what you couldn't talk about. And what you couldn't announce. Do that dance already.
Thanks.
Very exciting.